Welcome, everyone. I'm Madeline Di Nonno, President and CEO of the Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media. With me is our esteemed ASL interpreters, Andrea Lust and Lindsay Gibbons. Please click on the globe icon on the bottom of your screen if you would like to see them. And also, closed captioning is also available at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that in Los Angeles, we are currently on the traditional lands of the Chumash peoples. We want to recognize that we are all connected with one another and that the ground beneath my feet is historically the home of Indigenous peoples. Today's discussion would not be possible without the generous support of Craig Newmark Philanthropies, and we also want to thank our partners at Aspen Digital. Our topic today is centered on why it's critical that women have a seat at the table when it comes to cybersecurity workforce. Currently, there are only 24% of women that are comprised, and yet there's over 600,000 jobs available and growing. So now more than ever, we need to build a more diverse pipeline of workers so that women and girls everywhere can see themselves in cyber. Today, you will hear from an esteemed group of thought leaders who are working to create opportunities for women and girls to pursue careers in cybersecurity. So to kick us off, please welcome our founder and chair, Geena Davis.
Thank you, Madeline. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. We are excited to kick off 2023 with all of you and our stellar guest speakers to discuss the disturbing gender gap in cybersecurity and how we can change that. Last July, you heard about the important work of Craig Newmark Philanthropies and his extensive $50 million commitment to spotlight the importance of cybersecurity and to make the world safer for women and girls. To build upon that conversation, we have brought together an esteemed group of experts and leaders to discuss both the gender gap in people seeking a cybersecurity education and the lack of women in the cybersecurity workforce. They will share best practices on how to bridge that gap and also what the entertainment industry can do to reframe the narrative. And now it is my honor and privilege to introduce our dear friend, Craig Newmark, founder of Craigslist and Craig Newmark Philanthropies. Over to you, Craig.
Hey, folks. I do a lot of work in philanthropy these days, but mostly I'm known as the founder of Craigslist and possibly Nerd Patient Zero. My deal is that I've been paying a lot of attention to what's happening in cybersecurity and related warfare. And I see that the whole country is, to one extent or another, under attack. And it means that if you have the skills to stand up and acquire some knowledge of how to fight for the safety of your systems, whether you're at home or on the road, we're making education available to do that. On the civilian level, I'm talking about all this being cyber civil defense. Mostly it reflects the fact that I'm very ancient and I grew up during the duck and cover years of civil defense during the Cuban Missile Crisis and so on. The deal now, though, is that there's an enormous need and opportunity for people who can not only protect their home stuff, their neighborhoods, their businesses, but we need better and better cybersecurity training and opportunities for people to defend businesses and the country. Now, the theme of the Geena Davis Institute is that, if you can see it, you can be it. New fields like cybersecurity, well, if you're considering going into it, but if you're having difficulty imagining yourself doing that kind of work, it helps a lot if you could see someone doing the work in TV, in movies, or in real life. And the Geena Davis Institute is committed to showing people of all sorts in those roles, providing opportunities for everyone, just being fair, just treating people like we all want to be treated to it. So my deal is that I want everyone to hear the message of the Institute that You can see people doing this stuff. Everyone has a shot at this kind of work, and it means you can protect yourself, your friends, and you have a reasonable chance at getting what turns out to be a really good career. It's a big topic. I can go on indefinitely, but instead, I'll now hit my favorite button, mute. Oh, and remember, a nerd's got to do what a nerd's got to do.
Thank you, Craig. And again, today wouldn't be possible, and so much of the wonderful work that you do and support wouldn't be possible. So we really, really want to thank you. And we're super honored, and I'd love to introduce and bring her on screen, Kiersten Todt, who is the Chief of Staff for CISA. And for those of you who didn't know what that meant, which was me, that stands for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency. So welcome, Kiersten. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeline. It's great to be here. And thank you to Craig for your generosity, your thoughtful and meaningful engagement on these issues, and for the concept that you continue to build cyber civil defense. It's great to continue to work with you. And thank you to Geena Davis for your pioneering work to truly increase the representation of women in media and in the workforce, for leading the way through your own career by modeling for women of all ages the opportunities available to women and what's possible. In a recent interview, you talked about how Thelma and Louise was a pivotal moment in your career because of how women identified with the movie and with you. And as you share, it changed their thinking and showed how women will do anything to take control of their lives and retain it no matter what, rather than give up their power to society. So thank you for your leadership. And it's such an honor to be with each of you here today. And I'm very excited to join the discussion on these issues, which I've been working on since I started my role at CISA, closing the cyber gender gap, but also it's truly an issue in which I've been invested for many years. We live in a world where we're more dependent on technology than ever before. Every facet of our lives has a digital component. Some we see, like our smartphones, and some we don't, such as how we get electricity or drinking water. But in the open society in which we live, a society which affords opportunities through technology and innovation, we're vulnerable to malicious cyber actors, ranging from criminals to the most sophisticated nation-state actors. And in a global cyber ecosystem, one of the biggest challenges we face is the lack of cyber talent to address these growing threats confronting our nation. And Madeline talked about that number, 600,000. It continues to grow. And one major reason for this workforce shortage is the persistent gender gap in cyber. Without women pursuing careers in cybersecurity, the industry is really missing out on such a huge portion of the population's talent pool. And more importantly, we're missing out on a diversity of thought that brings new perspectives and experiences to the table and makes us better problem solvers. Because at the end of the day, cybersecurity is really about building solutions. It's about problem solving. It requires interdisciplinary approaches. We need experts not just in math and science, but in history, sociology, psychology. We need this diversity of thinking and to help individuals, especially women, see themselves in cyber. If she can see it, she can be it. To see how their aptitudes can be applied in this space and that they are needed. At CISA, we're engaged in some unique and valuable public and private partnerships, a meaningful partnership with Girls Who Code aimed at closing the gender gap and providing real solutions to tackle diversity disparities. And last year, we partnered with cyber.org and the Girl Scouts. So excited for this conversation with Meredith to create a cyber awareness challenge. And we recognize that we really need to go to where the talent is. We can't assume everyone will log on to USA Jobs, which is the primary funnel for government jobs, or have an Indeed account looking for cyber opportunities. And that's why we're also partnering at CISA with vocational schools, community colleges, and organizations that serve underserved communities. We're also promoting cyber education for K through 12 and higher education students so we can grow out this pipeline of future talent. As a society, we need to get to a place where kids, when they're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? They say cybersecurity as a vocation, becoming as common of an answer as teacher, construction worker, doctor. Kids want to be what they see, and we need to help them see themselves in cyber, which is also why we need to be bringing cybersecurity into early education. As soon as a child is given an iPad to learn to read, they need to be educated in cyber, to become fluent in it and develop curiosities about it, to learn cyber hygiene, and to understand how to keep themselves safe and secure online. It's like language. Kids internalize what they learn at an early age. And a key tool in our toolkit lies squarely with the entertainment industry and in the domain of pop culture and entertainment. There's no better way to show all individuals what is possible than by imagining it and making it come alive on the screen. Movies like Hackers helped inspire the current generation of cyber champions. Laura Diener, CISA at Northwestern Mutual, credits this movie as inspiring her career. Former White House CIO, Teresa Payton, talks about it as an inspiration for hers. We need more of this type of representation in the shows our young people are watching, and importantly, to make bringing cybersecurity into entertainment commonplace. In another recent interview, Geena talks about how women told her they now play sports because of the movie A League of Their Own. If she can see it, she can be it. We know the profound impact that the entertainment industry has on our country's perceptions, and it has the ability to be an all-star recruiter for young women for the cyber industry. The entertainment industry can portray women as cyber experts, as the geniuses. Women can star in these types of movies and see themselves in the field. Additionally, our favorite characters can educate society by acting out good cyber hygiene, the basics. In the same way that a character would strap on a seatbelt or put on a helmet as they hop on the bike, as if it's nothing, modeling the secure and responsible behavior we're seeking in order to create a culture of security, of cyber awareness and vigilance is so important. What if Emily in Paris spent a second to use a password manager to launch her next new marketing campaign? Or if Maverick in Top Gun took a beat to use multi-factor authentication during his training of the country's Top Gun pilots? Gender is a critical piece of the diversity conversation, but we must also work towards a cyber workforce that is as diverse as the country, as the world. We need to create an inclusive workforce, one that celebrates diversity of thought, experience, perspective, gender, race, sexuality, that acknowledges and celebrates neurodiversity. When we open the aperture to be inclusive, we'll welcome and embrace diversity, and importantly, bring more women into this space. At CISA, we're continuing to find ways to advance this diversity to build a workforce that is not just the model for government, but for all sectors. Later this year, we're going to be launching a public awareness campaign, and we'd love to partner with this institute to build out cyber awareness through women's roles in media. Our best opportunity to address the threats of today and the threats of tomorrow is through resilience, diversity, representation, and education. In order to be a resilient culture, a resilient society, we must build a diverse, representative cyber workforce. To do so, we must educate individuals through powerful tools like movies, television shows, and other media. And we must model this vocation and its many facets in how we portray women and in the roles they have. In the words of Geena Davis, if she can see it, she can be it. I look forward to the discussion this afternoon. Thanks so much for the opportunity to contribute to this conversation.
Well, stay on, Kiersten, and now I would love to welcome the rest of our illustrious panels. I would love to welcome Tanisha Martin, who is the founder and executive director of Black Girls Hack. Welcome. I would like to welcome Meredith Muscata, who's the CEO of Girl Scouts of Greater New York. Waiting for Meredith, I would like to welcome Justin Price, who is the Director of Partnerships and Special Initiatives for the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And last but not least, I would love to welcome Nicole Tisdale, who's the Senior Advisor for Cyber Workforce and Education with Aspen Digital. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And so I want to start and ground this conversation kind of with the data. And this is kind of two parts. What's happening with cybersecurity? Why is that becoming such a threat? And also, why is it so important? Kiersten, what you said about we're missing out, we need diversity of thought. Why is it so important that women and girls are at the table when it comes to cybersecurity? So just frame it for us, because it's, for me, I'm like, yeah, okay, a threat, whatever. I don't really understand what that means. So if you all, I would love to hear from all of you, why is this such a mounting issue, and why do we need to make sure women and girls are at the table? I'll open it up. Maybe Tanisha, you start first.
Absolutely. So to your first question, which is what's going on in cybersecurity, cybersecurity has historically been a very all boys club. And when you look at conferences, when you look at the learning that's out there, you'll see that it's majority of men that are represented. And, you know, as the theme that's been shown so far. And if you see it, then you know to be it. And a lot of people don't know what it is to be in cybersecurity, what that means, or they believe that they aren't technical enough, or that they don't have the right skills, or they have to be developers. And I think that what we're seeing right now is that we're lacking a lot of diversity in terms of gender, in terms of different neurodiverse groups in cybersecurity right now. And as a result, we're missing a lot of the perspectives and the thoughts and that they bring to that industry. So I think that we've been seeing in the last couple of years a push towards trying to get more women into the space. As a penetration tester, I think it was maybe about 1.5 years before I saw another woman on a pen test with me, right? And that would be absolutely astounding if a man would be able to say the same thing. Representing, I think, half of the world, we want to see more women operating the space, and we want them to see that there are people just like them who are doing the work.
Justin, what do you think?
Well, Madeline, first, thanks for having the National Cybersecurity Alliance and the Geena Davis Institute for having us to be part of this discussion. And I love Kiersten's opening statement, because that's truly important. To answer your question, this isn't just a problem currently in this field. Women and girls have always had this issue historically. And I want to get personal with this. My mother was the first woman ever to run for political office in 1975. She lost her first election. But in 1987, she successfully won her at-large seat, making her the first woman, not just first Black, the first woman to be elected in my hometown, Aiken, South Carolina. And it's a 150-year history, and is still serving on council, making it 36 years. Over the years, I've watched my mother break barriers in her political and professional career. And she'll tell you throughout her journey, to help break those barriers, she had people to advocate and support her so that she could help others. And for us, that's what we must do for women and girls who have an interest in cybersecurity, so that they can be the ones to break certain barriers in this field. So me on this side, as a male, and also Craig Newmark, we need to be the ones to advocate so that these girls and women can not only be the ones that are getting in the door, but they're also leading in that door and opening up these rooms. And it's not just at the level of the engineers, but also being the ones that are leading the charge in cybersecurity. We must do our part and be advocates for that.
Thank you for that. Meredith, why is this important for Girl Scouts? Why have you all determined that, hey, this cybersecurity, this is a big risk to our girls? Why have you taken that on?
First of all, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Craig, for being the men that you are. As we say in Girl Scouts, man enough to be a Girl Scout, to open the door for women and girls to be able to walk through. We appreciate you. This is such a concern for us from so many factors. One is the amount of jobs that this will be for the next generation. And if we are not the organization responsible for putting girls into that pipeline, that those jobs are not going to be filled by the kind of employees that are needed and the diversity that's needed. We as an organization specifically focus here in New York City on serving underrepresented and marginalized communities, and that diversification of thought and experience that needs to happen in cyber. We know that the world of cyber and AI has been designed for the users that look like and have the same experience as the designers. And that just the perpetuation of that, we're at a point in society where we can stop perpetuating that only viewpoint of the world and make sure that educational differences, socioeconomic differences are represented, all of the diversification that's needed. And I will just say that out of 20%, when we talk about that small number of women in the workplace in cyber and STEM, 76% of them were Girl Scouts alum. So we know as an organization over the past 110 years, we have the highest percentage of people getting put into those jobs, and we're just going to continue to double down on that.
Thank you so much. And Nicole, why is this important to Aspen Digital?
Yeah, well, so I'll just kind of follow up to the points that everyone else has said. First of all, thank you so much, Madeline, and everybody at Geena Davis Institute for partnering with us on this event. And for one of the things, and everybody's going to get tired of hearing this, one of the reasons this is a priority for Aspen is because we spend so much time working on the policies that surround and build within our cybersecurity industry. And so when you think about, when we say you see yourself in cyber, as the National Cybersecurity Alliance has done, what we mean is everyone on here may have had the dream of being an astronaut at some point in their life, but I guarantee you never knew that you wanted to be an astronaut until you knew space existed. And so for us at Aspen, when we're making these recommendations, when we say we need a diversity of perspectives, we've seen this play out, right? So in my previous life, I worked at the White House on cyber policy. I also worked in Congress on cyber policy. Y'all, it's really dangerous to be in a room where everyone looks the same, has the same background, and has the same perspective. That is how you get into a place of groupthink. And when you don't have everybody at the table, you can't make policy that is reflective on everyone. And so I think for us, our perspective, especially as Aspen Digital, is a leader in bringing together the cyber community to talk through and make recommendations on cyber policy. It's something we can't afford to do, to not have women and girls at the table with us when we're making these recommendations, and we take that very serious.
Thank you so much. And so now this next section is very near and dear to my heart, because as a person outside of the industry, when I hear cybersecurity, I'm like, it's this mystical, magical unicorn kind of like, what does that mean? It's kind of scary. And it was funny, not so funny, but when Justin threw some words out like MFA, I'm like, is that a master's in something? Like, what does that mean? So this is the let's unpack and demystify cybersecurity, right? Because when we hear it, it's like this big, chunky, it's like going into space. So I would love to hear from all of you. What does it mean to you? You know, I think of hackers and hoodies and all this kind of stuff. I think that I have to be a genius and, you know, have all kinds of crazy degrees. So Kiersten, maybe we'll start with you. Can you please demystify cybersecurity?
Well, it's absolutely what we're focused on at CISA, because I think if we're really looking at we're America's cyber defense agency. We're responsible for protecting critical infrastructure. But the interdependencies of technology mean that if everybody has a smartphone, then somehow they're connected to critical infrastructure in some way. I'm simplifying it, but it's this sense of when you log on to your work computer, if you fall victim to a phishing attempt, it's not as simple as your vulnerability can take down your company, but it's not too far from that. So it's this sense that everybody has a responsibility and accountability. So how do we create the accessibility of cybersecurity to get people to do the basics? Last year, we launched something called a More Than a Password campaign, looking at this master's in multi-factor authentication, but that element of MFA to really start to make this more accessible. But the key here, I absolutely believe so strongly in, is the ability to bring cyber into common discussion, into media, into entertainment. I talked about just what if we used entertainment and media to just have people do the commonplace pieces. If you grew up in the generation without seatbelts, you never saw characters get into cars. Now characters get into cars, they put on their seatbelt, and we're not necessarily registering, oh, they just put on their seatbelt. This is commonplace. You brush, there's plenty of scenes with people brushing their teeth. How do we start making these practices that feel very disconnected from us just something that people can do? And I think as we start to socialize that, as we put that into more commonplace tools, media is the most powerful tool to influence. If we're able to do that, and I think this is where content creation can have such a significant role, I do believe we're going to move the needle significantly in demystifying this so that people understand it. You don't have to be a coder to protect yourself online. And the key is that if you have the responsibility of a device, then you have to have the responsibility of keeping it secure. The same way, you don't have to be an auto mechanic to drive a car, but you need to know enough to make sure there's air in the tires, you've checked the oil, those basics. And I think, again, we have the opportunity through media to really start demystifying more specifically and more directly.
Thank you. So Tanisha, your organization, Black Girls Hack, Gosh, when I hear Black girls hack, I'm like, isn't that a bad thing? So can you demystify this idea of hacker, hoodies, and everything that goes with that?
Absolutely. I tell a story of when I went to the doctor and I told my doctor that I was a hacker, and she basically said, why would you tell somebody that? That's not something that you should, let people know about, right? Like it's something like that you would do behind closed doors. And I think for a lot of people, especially people who didn't grow up with computers on a day-to-day basis, I tell people all the time, I did my college applications on a typewriter because, we didn't have computers at that time. But for those people who don't know what hacking is, it's important that they are able to talk to, like, for example, their kids or maybe their grandkids about it. There's always this picture of a hooded figure that's in their basement, away from sunlight, and they're doing sketchy behaviors. But for the most part, all the companies that we interact with on a day-to-day basis hire ethical hackers, which are basically the good guys, the white hats, to protect the systems, to find vulnerabilities before the bad guys have the opportunity to. And I think that that's important because when you're thinking about, things that maybe a developer didn't think about to get into a system, you want to have different perspectives, right? If you have all the same thoughts, someone mentioned groupspeak earlier, or groupthink earlier. If everybody thinks the same ways, then they can only imagine, one way to get in, right? But, the reason why our, adversaries are able to be so successful, I think in a lot of areas are because they're able to think outside the box. They don't subscribe to like a one mind type of thing. And I think it's important that our cybersecurity workforce has that same perspective. So, with Black Girls Hack, we're open to everybody and we're trying to, get people to reimagine what it means to be a hacker. You can be in the legal profession like Nicole or Camille, or you can be in so many different areas in finance or social media. Within cybersecurity, there are so many different industries and so many opportunities for people to be able to join the industry and bring their perspectives. And I think that that's important, especially as we're portraying, jobs like cybersecurity in the media. You don't have to be a hooded, cloaked figure in the garage. You can have, unicorn horns or butterfly wings, or whatever it is that how you represent to bring yourself to the industry.
Thank you so much, Justin. I'm going to ask you to build on it because we had a joke when I was like, "What's MFA?" And also, Kiersten had talked about cyber hygiene. So can you talk about what the Alliance is doing in terms of that, and in terms of the education and programs, and how you're demystifying cybersecurity?
Yeah, the hackers and hoodies is played out these days, right? Like no one that's not cybersecurity. If anyone was interested in what that's what the definition of what are people doing in the space. For the Alliance, and as everybody, you're gonna hear, Madeline, everybody's doing it in a different way, but strategically we're trying to make sure the campaigns all fit, right, of how to do this, right? Through our website, staysafeonline.org, and I'll share that in the chat. We have a ton of resources and we make sure to cover all the tracks from your cybersecurity company needing a ton of resources to the average person who's just using the internet and wanting to be proactive, being safer online. We did a big rebrand last year of the website, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't have the usual jargon, right? The MFA that people are not going to understand on one side, but everybody's going to understand on the other. And we wanted to use a tone that's familiar to everyday people. For us, we must make the differentiation. When we talk about technology, we talk about security. But when we talk about safety, we talk about people. And we do it intentionally so that we can humanize the problem a bit more, that human behavior element. You don't secure humans, you keep them safe.
Wow, that is fabulous. I am actually writing that down. I love that. Meredith, I want to go over to you because one of the things we talked about is, and socializing, right? We've talked about how media can have the power to socialize. So talk about, in terms of Girl Scouts, why it's so important to go as young as possible. What are you doing? How are you making it attractive? How are you demystifying cybersecurity to young girls that are getting involved in Girl Scouts.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because so we start at the age of 5. I would say that there was a massive change, and Kiersten, we talked about this as well. About 7 years ago, the data was very different, that especially young girls were finding their cyber or tech identity at the age of 10, so like 5th grade. That changed drastically over these past few years, that girls are now creating their STEM identity at the youngest of 5, 6, and 7. So our program we always have started at that age, and it's about becoming habitual, right? The demystification is about what's the vernacular language that kindergartners are using in technology with technology. The pandemic obviously changed all of that, because that's how they were now schooling. What is their safety like in there? So creating that space in the Girl Scout environment of what they are already doing every day, and giving that confidence that they are owning it and utilizing it, not just using it and observing it. So when you start at that young age, all of the language, then the words become bigger, the tech becomes harder, but it doesn't become scarier. It just becomes a norm, and it really habitualizes it. So we see that progression that goes straight through, and have girls as young as 4th and 5th grade that last year participated in a hackathon and a cyber attack here in New York City that they created, and then the other team defended it, right? So putting exactly right into that civil defense at the hands of 5th and 6th graders.
Thank you so much. And so, Nicole, I know that a lot of the work that you're doing is on, policies, but how do we make sure that from a legislation standpoint, from an educational curriculum standpoint, from all these standpoints, that this pathway is open and attractive, for girls to kind of get in and then navigate, from there? Because I don't think there's any official curriculum that introduces cybersecurity, because it doesn't fall under sciences per se. It doesn't fall under English. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, so one of the biggest things, which is why we're happy to be partnering with you all, is really getting folks to understand that there is no set way to get into cybersecurity, right? So while we want folks to have a cybersecurity curriculum, I'm an English and a political science major, and I didn't take any computer science classes. I can count on my hand the number of STEM classes that I took when I was in undergrad. And so for me, my introduction to cybersecurity policy was through practicing, right? So real world practice, where you end up sitting in a room and someone has like, we just had this major cyber attack. What is it we're going to do? And so as we talk about how we kind of get girls and women interested in cybersecurity, I just want to remind everyone, and I put this in the chat too, the cybersecurity field is just like any other field. It's very similar to Hollywood, right? And so in the Hollywood industry, you need attorneys, you need people who do marketing, you need folks who do comms, you need this whole ecosystem. And so one of the things that we've been trying to think about on a policy and a legislative side is not just empowering women and girls who want to go into STEM, but also empowering women and girls who also want to go into the arts, and making sure that they have exposure to this too. So we'll talk about, and this is why I love the Girl Scouts, where it's like you have a whole curriculum and you almost have like all of these things that you can pick and choose. And for a lot of girls and women too, because we're also getting chats about how women who may already be in another field can transition to cybersecurity. You want to just try this stuff out, Madeline. I know that doesn't sound like, I know that's terrifying to a lot of folks, but you're not going to know exactly where you fit into the cybersecurity space until you at least try something out. And for me, I landed squarely on the legal side and policy, and I do a lot of work on what we call cyber incident response. So it's all the bad stuff, right? So, if Colonial Pipeline happened, and people may remember that was in 2021, where the whole East Coast was out of gas. Well, that was a major cyber attack. And those are the kind of things that I work on. And like when Tanisha is talking about when she did penetration testing, which is really where you just kind of go into someone lets you into their network on the what we call the inside of their computer, and you just tell them where they have vulnerabilities, where things may need to be fixed. That's not something that I'm able to do, but making sure that this whole ecosystem is working together, because if you have enough, if Tanisha is teaching enough people about penetration testing, in theory, I won't have to respond to so many cyber attacks, right? And so like this whole community just kind of works together at that angle. And so when we talk about legislation and policy, it really is it's the whole field. So we need more students, we need more underserved students getting into colleges, right? And so when you get into college, you have programs like NCA where you can see yourself in cyber. And it's really a full wraparound that we're trying to create at Aspen and others so that everyone understands what their role is in the community.
Thank you so much. So one of the things we talked about on our call, and you said there's a big secret in cyber, big secret. And the secret was that you're constantly learning new things. And so I'd love for all of you, and maybe starting with Kiersten, what that means. And also, I'd still like for you to demystify a little bit about you don't have to be, you don't have to have multiple degrees, or there's so many different pathways into cyber that can fit you as a person, whether you go to university, you don't go to university. So Kiersten, I'll start with you. What are you learning? Like, what's the secret?
Well, the secret is we don't know everything. We're constantly learning, and the attackers are always ahead of us, right? So they've figured out some creative way to expose a vulnerability, which means that we're always behind. And that's not meant to discourage. That should be exciting and exhilarating to think about how to problem solve if you're a problem solver. But I think to your point about what do we need in this space, as I said earlier, this is so much about interdisciplinary approaches to problem solving, because we don't know the threats of today. Today, we're talking about ransomware. We don't know what that's going to look like in a year. So being able to have people with different experiences, not all who have been growing up in math and science, although that's obviously a super important point and component of the workforce, is critical to understanding how to problem solve. I was working on an effort with the White House a few years ago called the Cyber Moonshot, which was about securing the internet by 2030. I'll let you know how that's going, because there's a little bit of a journey there. But we brought somebody in to talk about the moonshot concept from USAID, and she talked about the program that they set out to build the Ebola suit to get healthcare workers into the field where Ebola was running rampant. And ultimately, one of the key designers of the suit was a wedding dress designer, because that person knew breathability of fabric, knew how to move in certain things. So having that perspective as they were designing the suit was critical. And I think that's an important analogy to this space, because you don't have to come from it if you're in the middle of your career. It's your interest, it's your desire, and your different aptitudes. The other piece that I'll say, there was a question from a Q&A about how do you make this more interesting. We have to do a much better job in defining these positions. Position descriptions are very much this bucket of ambiguity, and it is typically just very much about jargon. I ran President Obama's Commission on Cybersecurity in 2016, and my title within government was IT specialist. I can guarantee you that I couldn't be an IT specialist if my life depended on it, but at the time, that was the only position that came close to cybersecurity policy. So we've got to be thinking through, how do we articulate positions so when we're posting them, because whether it is LinkedIn or these other tools, this is how people are getting access to it. So how do we make that language more accessible, to your question about demystifying? And I think really looking at the fact that this is a multidisciplinary field. So if you have an interest in the field, then inevitably you have an aptitude that can be applied to it. That may take a little bit of creativity, and that may take some mentorship and people in the field to help you. But this is absolutely a critical journey that we've got to help all individuals be on and help them through it.
So Tanisha, I remember on our call, we all had a little joke when you talk about language and all of this. There's, did people think CISA was the real CISA? We talked about that. And what are the things that, you're learning constantly?
I think the cybersecurity is one of those things that, you know, you have to learn on an everyday basis. I think that, you know, historically, when we think about careers, our parents and our grandparents probably told you that you had to go to high school, graduate, that you had to go to college. And, you know, depending on where you came from, there might be like a master's degree in there that you absolutely had to get. And I think that today we're seeing a lot more people who are leading very successful careers in cybersecurity without going what we call the quote unquote traditional route. So like, you know, we mentioned, you know, things like, you know, explaining what it actually means to have a certain title, right? So, you know, I know at Black Girls Hack, we do a thing on Sundays. We haven't done, kicked them back up this year, called Bring a Hacker to Work days, where we basically talk about like, what does it mean to be a pen tester? What does it mean to be a hacker? What does it mean to be a cybersecurity analyst? Because, you know, some of these titles can be a very broad catch-all for, you know, anything under the umbrella, right? And in order for you to, you know, kind of say like, hey, this is what I want to be when I grow up, you have to know that that thing exists, right? Like Nicole said, you know, how can you imagine, you know, being an astronaut if you don't know that there's space, right? So we have to kind of introduce people to kind of the possibilities that are out here. You know, when we talk about like a CISA, you know, there are so many different things that people think when it comes to it, but then there's, you know, the actual work that they do, which I think is very, very important. And, you know, they're making efforts to connect to the people who are actually on the ground, who are trying to get people hired, that are trying to get people into career fields to kind of figure out, you know, what is it that we're doing wrong and like, what are some different approaches? And I think that that takes a lot of growth because traditionally people tend to think like, hey, I know how to solve all of the things, right? And they're, you know, saying, hey, whatever we've been doing hasn't been working. And they're reaching out to industry and partnering with different groups and saying like, you know, hey, how can we do this better? So, you know, I absolutely love things like I think there was a request for information that went out recently for K through 12 education. I absolutely love seeing that because, you know, there are a lot of different ideas that people have on how we can get people into these positions. And I think that it requires like diversity of thought and diversity of experience. So we need to kind of broaden our net as we're trying to reimagine, you know, how to make differences for the next generation of, you know, I hope ethical hacking rock stars, but, you know, the other areas of cybersecurity as well.
So Justin, you know, where you are today versus where you started and where you see things happening at the Alliance, can you kind of unpack a little bit about, you know, learning constantly, and just because you think you know something doesn't mean that that's going to be relevant even 2 years from now?
Like I said before, Madeline, we're in the human behavior element. So there's one key word that I think the entertainment industry can understand what we're trying to do: marketing. Marketing to individuals that are interested in these types of jobs. I'm an HBCU alum, Savannah State University. I've had mentors to help me guide and steer my career. I had classmates that didn't have that opportunity. And that we all know on this panel, there are there are unfulfilled positions, tons of jobs that are unfulfilled in the public and private sector. And while organizations are working diligently to retain and recruit and do all the things to have diverse candidates to fill these open positions, the cybersecurity field is ever changing, right? It's both technical and non-technical. This field is moving at a fast pace. Top of that, there are 50 historically Black colleges and universities that have a cybersecurity or computer science program, but African Americans only make up a small percentage of the workforce, right? And one of the concerns with the research that I did with some students at these institutions was, I have a lack of understanding of cybersecurity jobs. I also have a lack of confidence in the job world, right? Don't have an internship that is out there, don't know what internships are out there, even regionally or nationally. How do I navigate that process? So what we did was, we did a lot of research. We said what we thought what we could maybe fit in the space of like that human behavior element. And that's when Nicole was mentioning and Kiersten was mentioning the see yourself in cyber. Let's mentor these kids with soft skills. Let's try to see if we can navigate and help them navigate the security, privacy, and risk job search process. And what we want to do is help a pipeline or build a pipeline of Black professionals to fill the workforce gap. And we do this in 3 approaches really quickly. We use the mentoring aspect. Together platform is our place that we house it, and we have over 100 users, both the mentor and mentee side. And they discuss a series of topics ranging from what to wear in an interview, what should I expect for my first year being employed, job opportunities that are out there, certifications that I could take, right? These are important for these kids because some of these students have some, not all, in terms of a lack of confidence, they have it. And honestly, most students feel that because of the responsibility of maybe being the first generation to go to school, right? That's important. Second approach is we go to these kids, we go to these schools, in-person events. Nicole was one of my keynote speakers at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Kiersten, we've had CISA to participate in some of our panel discussions there about what's the day in the life of a cybersecurity professional. So we've been to Prairie View A&M University and Texas Southern and St. Phillis College, all Texas and Louisiana schools. And now we're taking the roadshow to North Carolina and South Carolina. And then the third approach is giving back, right? Giving back to these kids. And we've added a scholarship element with One in Tech, with the CISA Foundation that starts this semester. So the way we're trying to do it is, how do we get kids to be excited about cybersecurity? Not look at it as not look at it as a way of, oh, this is boring, or this is not, this is not fun. No, there are different opportunities, technical and non-technical, that you can get involved with. But we have to, in our lane, in our world, we have to identify and let these kids see this. They got to see it to believe it. Each one, reach one, teach one. I always go to that motto. We have to follow that in order to make this sustainable and continue the generation of these kids helping and uplifting others that want to get interested into cybersecurity.
Thank you, Justin. So Meredith, I want you to build on a little bit and talk about what has been the impact. What have you seen working for Girl Scouts, knowing that you're starting at 5, going all the way up into, teenage, young adult? How are you, what's the retention, and any impact or success of your programs that you want to share?
Yeah, no, thank you. Because there's the soft skill impact, and then there's the numbers, right? And like I mentioned before, of the 20% of women in STEM, 76% were Girl Scouts at that time, at some time in their life. So that impact of just constantly educating and keeping up with the pace. We're a 110-year-old organization, but yet are able to keep up right now with cyber because of things that Craig is doing, has equipped us to be able to invest in. This past couple of years, again, the drastic difference of going in like tens of thousands of girls a year opting in themselves to cyber and tech programs on an annual basis, that they understand that it is a fundamental tool or language that they need to be successful in any leadership position. It's not even the option of saying, oh, I'm going to go into STEM or cyber. This is another tool I have to have in my belt, even if I want to be a dancer, an influencer, a movie star, or a construction worker, right? Like, no matter what you choose, this is going to be a fundamental tool that they need to have. The other thing that we are seeing is more girls getting, and talking about the alternative paths of leadership, more girls getting certified or going into the tech sector without the traditional leadership or college path. When we talk about accessibility, we have to understand that that is not accessible to, for us, the majority of the girls that we serve, whether it hasn't been modeled before, whether it's not financially available, or right now that they want to actually be in the workforce and be on the front end of this design, right? And this epic thing that is going to change in the next 5 or 10 years, that they can be a leader in it. So we're seeing more and more girls at younger ages opting in and going straight into the workforce. And that to me is a huge success and a huge win.
Thank you so much. And so Nicole, when you think about your digital equity accelerator and some of the things that you're doing, can you share with us any impact on your results, where you may be going? Because again, like we said, cybersecurity is ever changing, directions that you may be going in.
Sure, I'm happy to. So I think one of the biggest things that we've been doing, not just the DEI accelerator, but also in 2018, the Aspen Institute put out a practical guide for hiring managers on how to write a job description so that you actually get applicants for the job that you want. Because we know that women and people of color will see a job application that requires 10 qualifications, and they'll have 9 of them and talk themselves out of applying for the job. Well, what we also know is all 10 of those job requirements are not what you need to do the job. And so what we found, especially in the cyber community, is sometimes people are overshooting even the job placements, right? And that happens at all levels. Those are entry-level positions, those are mid-level, but it's also internships. And so one of the angles that Aspen is taking is we are going to always work on the policy, but we're also just trying to give people practical tools. So if one of the undertakings that we're considering for this upcoming year is if you want to set up a promotion where you start to introduce cyber to folks that are already at your company or your organization, what does that look like? What does that programming look like? How much does it cost? How many people do you need to get involved? Is it just sending a whole bunch of people to conferences? Is it bringing a whole bunch of people in? We're trying to meet people where they are, which is to not be in this ivory tower and just theorize about what people should be doing and actually go out into the field and hear from folks. What is it that you need? And so Justin has mentioned, everybody talks about see yourself in cyber. When I went to that event, it was so interesting because you get to see, I was nervous. I still get nervous about going to these things. And I'm like, it's going to be a whole bunch of computer scientists, students that are majoring in like STEM. And they're going to be like, why is this English poli-sci person coming to talk to us? And one of the students was in fashion design. And she like put me on the spot, which I loved. And she was like, okay, what would I do in cyber with a fashion design degree? And we immediately started talking about not just the most recent cyber attacks where you've seen fashion companies have their entire sketches and designs stolen, but also they're not able to sell their products. And so you see their whole spring line just sitting on the shelves because they can't figure out what's happening to their bookkeeping system. But we just talked about in general, the concept of the creativity that lives within the fashion design industry and how over time, because cybersecurity is still so young, you're going to need people to take a step back and be creative about the solutions that we're going to have and that are going to be needed in cybersecurity. Because as Kiersten already mentioned, these things are still evolving. And you said it earlier, Madeline, like the secret is out. All of this stuff is new, right? Like this is when we talk about cybersecurity, if someone tells you they've been doing cybersecurity their whole lives and they're not 15 years old, you need to question that, right? You know, like if I tell people, I'm like, you can get into cyber and you can be the oldest expert in it because we really haven't been doing it that long. So for us, we are trying to not just focus on the policy, but give people the practical tools that they need. CISA has done a really good job about this. And as we keep saying CISA, Madeline, you mentioned it earlier. Whenever I tell someone I'm doing in my family or my friends, I'm like, I'm going to do an event with CISA today. Everybody gets really excited because they think I'm talking about the singer CISA. And I'm always like, no, like the other CISA, the cyber CISA. And they're like, well, what are you doing with them? And one of the things that CISA has done, which I love in the entire Department of Homeland Security, now, if you have an internship with CISA and you want to work on cyber or intelligence, you can have that internship for 2 summers. You will get paid and you will get a conditional job offer because we've talked about this, but I want to, for people who are listening, y'all, these are really good jobs. These are life-changing jobs. This is coming from someone who grew up under the poverty line in Mississippi. You cannot minimize how good it feels to work on a policy or work on an issue every day, feel like you are protecting your community, your country, and you get paid to do it, right? And so I think for us, it's a combination. That was a long way to say it. It's a combination of giving people the policies, but then meeting them where they are so that they have what they can put into practice today.
So if we want to talk about putting it into practice, one of the things we all mentioned, and Kiersten, you mentioned, is the power of media, the power of the make-believe world. So we're going to go to questions, but Kiersten, I'm going to start with you. what would be the trope or stereotype that you'd like to see eliminated? And if you were in a room, because we have many content creators on our call today, if you wanted to pitch a character idea or show idea, particularly with one children, what would you like to see?
So it's also about how do we make it cool? So the image that I want to get rid of is the white 20-something male in his basement with a hoodie. Not to say that that's not all there, but that is this, it's become very intimidating because it's this sense of, you know, secret and all of that. And I think Tanisha's point about hacking, there's so much that is so fascinating in this space. So making it cool, there's an ad that's out there now that talks about kids creating. I think it's for one of the big technology companies. And it's very inspiring because it shows a great cross section of kids and how they're each innovating in their own way, whether it is about design or about gaming or about sports, it's whatever can apply. So would love to see women, young girls doing this the same way that they talk about fashion or food, that this is just a cool topic that they can come in and convene and create communities around. Because that's the other piece of this. You know, we see cyber as very isolating, that individual in the basement by himself versus this is a community that we're all creating. And it's one of our best shots at this true diverse community. Because it's so interdisciplinary, we're pulling from all sorts of capabilities as we've talked about. And so I'd love to see some of the younger shows bringing this in a way that's completely accessible. It's not even discussed that there's anything to demystify. It's, you know, logging on and using multi-factor and using the words that are so scary to us as adults just as sort of second nature, and having them do that maybe as part of another storyline, or that there's a show that features, you know, the young girl that has that cool cyber talent, and that's the superpower. You know, for all those shows that talk about kids' superpower, what about cybersecurity? We're also looking at that word, cyber. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about language, and I think we have a long way to go in evolving language. But media is a great place to bring content creators and creativity in to start evolving language so that it does demystify it. And I think that this whole element of making it accessible and really just showing that everyone can do it and that it's cool and fun and it's not meant to be threatening and intimidating. It's actually inspiring the same way a science project, or to the point about space, like everyone hears space and an astronaut, and that's just cool. So what if we kind of took that same tenor and tone and applied it to cybersecurity, and we had all of the movies and the, you know, alternate realities that, you know, that we now have in space, and we did that with cyber, and people then can kind of relate, use the science fiction for good, but start at a really young age.
Tanisha, what about you?
I want to see much of the same. I want to see, you know, like I said, the reimagining of what, you know, a hacker is supposed to look like. It's always the hooded figure. I want to see some pink hoodies. I want to see, you know, more women that are actually in this space. And I want to see like the characters that are on the screens, like for them to be representative of the wide variety of people. And I also want to get rid of the media expectation that hackers are lone solo wolves and they're by themselves, right? I want there to be the same type of community that we see in so many other things, for people not to feel like they have to go about their cybersecurity careers or their experiences alone, for them to basically work together. So I would love to see, like, you know, instead of just like, you know, when we look at things like Ocean 8, where we see like, you know, one girl hacker, you know, I'd love to see like, hey, let's put like quite a few hackers and let's, you know, put them together and make them do amazing things, because those are the stories I think that would appeal to people and let them know that that's a possibility.
I'd want to watch that. Justin, what about you?
So, and we keep Madeline about saying, you know, hoodies and all that stuff. So it's funny when we kind of get to this question. So not only do the people who are working in cybersecurity look like everybody, so do the criminals, right? There's a lot of stereotyping with the cyber nerds and scary looking criminals, but that's understandable because the cliches are relatable to a lot of people, and it's kind of like, it's easy recognizable. So rather asking the industry to have those stereotypes, I think it'd be great to partner with us with more of the PSAs, right? Recognition of Cybersecurity Awareness Month with CISA, what Meredith is doing with Girl Scouts of New York, and Tanisha with Black Girls Hack, and Nicole with the Aspen Institute. That's where you get some of the ways that we are being cool and creative and marketing these things. That's where I think the real work and fun can begin. We're not going to ask you to stop doing the way you make TV. That's a little bit of a stretch for us to do as people in this space. But I think it's more important to educate in terms of what we do and how it's easier for anybody out there to become a cyber ally for us. And I'll hit this personal part of this too, is Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever is going to come out tomorrow on Disney, right? And I've been excited since end of December to see this again. And one of the things that brings near and dear outside of T'Challa being gone, but seeing my little cousins who are girls, not just watching the whole movie, but seeing the science that's happening with the girls in the movie, right? The girl going to MIT and they're having to build and do these things in order to, for the plot to go on. That, like, those things are important and those things are impactful. So we can do it. The entertainment industry can do it. We can do it. So why don't we just do it, connect together and make it happen for young girls and for young girls and women. And to Kiersten's point, that cyber hygiene, right? That's the cyber hygiene to these things.
Thank you so much. Meredith, what about you? And also Nicole? And then we're going to bring Jasmine on for 1 or 2 questions.
Awesome. Yeah, no, Justin, I love that. And Kiersten, the cyber hygiene, right? We don't teach our kids to brush their teeth when they're 14 or 15 when they go to the movies the first time. We don't teach them to put their seatbelts on when they get their driver's license, right? So even from the film aspect, pulling it back, not only am I the CEO responsible for like 25,000 girls, I have 5 daughters of my own. So seeing the influence, like ridiculous influence that media has from the time whether it's just the TV or it's the iPad or whatever they are exposed to watching, all of the shows and media directed towards kids, do not underestimate how smart they are. And what may be scary to us as like talking about it in a big cinema movie way is they're doing this, they're getting exposed to it, right? So I think that not underestimating how young this absorption of this material starts, right? Keeping it habitual, putting it in there. I want all the stereotypes to start looking like these girls behind me. That's what I want to see in media, of strong superhero, positive, great values, social justice activists, how they're using cyber to make the world literally a better place in their day-to-day lives. And that can start happening through the media at the youngest of age when they're exposed to it.
Couldn't agree. Nicole?
Yeah, I will tell y'all, I am a product of Matlock and Perry Mason. And in the heat of the night, I am an attorney because my grandma used to watch those shows and I thought they were really cool. There were no lawyers in my family. There were no lawyers in my town. I saw them on TV and I was like, I want to do that, right? I want to advocate for people. I want to use my voice to help people out. And I will say the answer to this, y'all, I love a good spy, a woman spy movie. That is my genre. My algorithm knows that is my genre. I'm talking about movies like The Long Kiss Goodnight, where Geena Davis was in there. Now, my favorite Geena Davis movie is A League of Their Own, because I'm like a long-term softball player. But I also remember, I loved Kim Possible. I was probably a little too old to be watching Kim Possible. I would always say the kids I was babysitting were watching it, but I love Kim Possible. And most recently, I love the 355, where you had women spies, and one of them was a cybersecurity expert, right? And it was part of our storyline. And so as I think about what we can do, to Justin's point, it does need to be cool. I also don't want people to think that it's just, this came up in the chat, it's not just the people that are doing bad stuff with cyber. Cyber is not the thing to be afraid of. It is the thing to empower you. And so, yeah, I'm here for the spy movies, and I love weaving the cyber into the women, right? Like, for a lot of people, what cyber policy is how to help and protect people without guns and bullets. And I think that's something really positive to show to our communities.
Fantastic. So Jasmine, I think I'm going to bring you on to ask a few questions, and then I know we're running over, but I could see people are hanging with us, which is great. And so everybody, this is Jasmine Barad, our Senior Director of Events. Over to you, Jasmine.
Yeah, oh my gosh, this was amazing. Thank you all so much. We had tons of questions coming in, so I know we're not going to have time to do them all, but I think a few times this was asked and we kind of just touched upon that. But for children who they want to be more exposed to cybersecurity, for parents, are there resources they can share with their kids, or are there examples in media currently that they could expose their children to as good examples? Justin, I think I saw you hand. Oh, you're on mute.
The number one sin in webinar, take yourself off mute. Yeah, for us, and great question. On our website, we do have educational resources. We have worked together with Palo Alto Networks. We launched an educational page that is designed to grow diversity of cybersecurity industry and combat the critical shortage of cybersecurity professionals available today. The library has, it's for individuals, educators, public and private organizations, and it's an expansive repository of assets. So it has in-depth K through 12 cybersecurity curriculum overview, higher education program guides, job training information for career changers and veterans, and the resource is free. And there's over 100, so kids and parents can choose from whatever they want.
Great. Anybody else?
Jasmine, we have resources online, but what we're trying to do a better job of, we're actually redoing our website, is becoming a repository for the resources that are out there. I mean, Justin mentioned, and it's interesting, this group, we all have partnerships with each other. And so we recognize at CISA, we don't have to have authorship. It's about how can we do a better job of being a repository for all the great work of those organizations represented on this call, as well as many others, so that there's a one-stop shop for tools. But you see it with a lot of these communities, and, you know, the Girl Scout badge, and there are songs, and, you know, really looking at different type of curricula. But the one other piece that I would mention is, if you want it in your schools, I mean, this is activist, but ask for it, because I think that you're starting to see cyber literacy and fluency becoming more common, and we're starting to see more schools bringing that in, and then they're accessing really good tools that are local or otherwise.
Yeah, I'm just going to drop in also in the chat, just our page that goes directly to all of our STEM programs, including, like I said, the major focus right now on cyber. One of the things that we started doing specifically during COVID, obviously, when we switched to virtual, is making these accessible to everyone. So whether you're a Girl Scout or not, whether you're a family or a household who needs these resources, we certainly welcome anyone to be able to utilize them.
Great. Okay, goodness, we probably should just do one more question. Let's see, what's a good one? Nicole, you might be answering this, but book recommendations. You know, we talk about media, but are there books out there that we could recommend?
I was actually just typing this answer into the chat. Feels like a good time to remind y'all, I like spies and thrillers. But I would recommend This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends. It's based on fact, but it's actually written by Nicole Perloff, who was a former a New York Times reporter that covered cybersecurity issues. So it's just filled with a whole bunch of like thrilling possible cyber incidents that could happen. But just remember, y'all, I'm really into thrillers and spy stuff. So don't read it and think that it's all like bad, scary stuff. That's just the stuff that I'm really interested in.
And I think to stay on theme, there's a book that I'm reading on now. This is called The Rise of Cyber Women. I'm not sure who it is written by, but it's like a collection of stories about different women that are in the cybersecurity space. It's been very interesting so far.
That sounds interesting. So I think, as Jasmine mentioned, we're all out of time. I just want to thank, of course, our ASL interpreters, Andrea and Lindsay, and I want to thank, all of you, Kiersten, Justin, Tanisha, Meredith, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us today. For our members, this video will be available to you that you can, watch it again. And who knows? You heard it here. I'm hoping when we follow up with some of our content creators, there could be some good show or movie ideas that come out. And again, I just want to thank Craig Newmark so much. I want to thank Aspen Digital. We love you as a partner, and we'll see you again. Thanks, everybody.